All right, welcome to Traffic with Win, part 10, 20, whatever the number is. Want to dive deeper into the recruiting process and how you can build a world-class recruiting pipeline, and the three biggest mistakes that people make, but also the three steps that you always have to really build a world-class sales team. So the biggest mistake that I see most companies, startup founders do out there when it comes to trying to find sales talent, which is very different than really most of the jobs, because most of the jobs you can judge the quality and the qualifications of your candidates just by their experience and their credentials, right? If you're hiring for a project manager, it's very clear, and there's degrees for that. When it comes to sales and like business in general, it's just like entrepreneurship. It's not like people can typically go to school to learn how to do sales. The only way to really learn sales properly is really doing the job. And if you're hiring like junior sales reps, it's often not their experience, but more of their character qualities, traits, right? Their personalities that matter and predict their success. And so you can't really go off their resume most of the times with a sales role. And then more importantly, I think one of the things that Cole Gordon said that I always remember is, unlike every other function in a business, sales is the only role where you cannot function unless you feel inspired and motivated every day, right? And I have a background, I have a degree in accounting, I have a lot of accounting friends, so this is not a knock with my accounting friends whatsoever. But I think this is Cole Gordon. I think Cole Gordon has mentioned this before. Like, some days, if you're an accountant or a bookkeeper, if you don't feel like it, you can still perform well. Sales, not at all, because sales is such a specific thing where it's a transfer of energy and conviction from you to the prospect. If you don't have it, you're not going to be able to perform the role well. Okay, so without further ado, the biggest mistake that I see companies doing with their recruiting is they're trying to recruit one person and just one person for the role, for the gap, because they're trying to remove themselves either from selling or from appointment setting themselves, and they don't think long term about the recruiting pipeline. And what happens is, just like with getting clients, they go through this cycle, feast and famine cycle of hiring sales reps. It working kind of okay in the beginning with one guy or one gal, and then it either doesn't work out long term and they churn because they're not closing, or they become overly dependent on one person who is basically the business, just like with clients. And so the biggest mistake that a lot of companies I see, including multinational, publicly traded, $20 billion revenue company do, especially with the sales force, is they don't have a recruiting pipeline and they don't have a recruiting process to get a lot of applicants at the top and then filter them down to like really good candidates, and then interviewing process to kind of weed out and find the best candidates. And then even beyond that, they don't really have a bench and an ascension model for the employees, so that someone can start as a brand new salesperson and then they stay with the company, they learn, they have all of this intellectual property that you invest in this person, about the industry, about your product and the problem, the pain that you solve, and then they lose the sales rep to a competitor or elsewhere, right? Worse would be a competitor, because you've invested in educating them about the industry and your prospects, and they go and sell for somebody else. So I think personally, from my point of view, recruiting is one of those things where you have to be willing to and able to invest in recruiting, just like how you would investing in scaling and growing your business with client acquisition. It's in the beginning, when you're starting out your business, it's okay to do short-term promotions to get clients, but over the long term, you want a predictable way to get clients in the same way, and you want those clients to stay with you for as long as possible, right? So you increase the lifetime value of your customers, and yet founders don't think like that when it comes to the talent. And I'm speaking specifically about sales here. So that's the biggest mistake. So what I see is like one-off job post on social media whenever they need somebody. And then they find one person who they think is great, is good. And then they make an offer, and that person either get a better offer somewhere else for more money, for better vision, for better recruiting process, and they lose like the candidate, right? So that's one. Or you might look out into having somebody who's really good, and then you're really dependent on that person for everything, right? Especially if they're one really good closer in the company and there's nobody else who can close in your company. That's fine, but that's the exact same thing as having one client who accounts for 80% of your business. You wouldn't want that for your clients. Why would you want that for your sales reps, right? I wouldn't want that for my business as well. So, biggest mistake. The for that, the solution to that is, number one, is always be recruiting or always be building relationships. And two, would be having a really, really dial-in recruiting process where you treat your recruiting, your talent, like a sales process where there's going to be a CRM, whether that's a Google Sheet and a Google Form system or an actual talent management system. Most companies, if you're just starting out hiring your first couple of reps, I would recommend Google Forms and Google Sheet to start. You don't need anything more fancy than that. But the key thing is always be recruiting and connecting with people, always interviewing, even if that interview is a 10-20 minutes connection call with somebody who's might be a potentially a great hire for you down the road. And then second is to have a great filtering process. It's kind of like a funnel. Again, nothing different than a sales process. Treat your recruiting like a funnel where you have a lot of candidates up top and you need a place to keep track of them and keep in touch with them. And also, how do you filter them out so that only the great candidates spit out in the end, okay? So let me take you through a very, very simple recruiting step that I've used, that I've seen very good sales recruiters and coaches out there do. So you need at least 3 steps in the system. Number one is the lead capture. How do you collect a lot of them at the top, right? Number 2 is you need at least a filtering process. This is kind of like your tripwire, your low-end offer here, right? And this tripwire for the recruiting process that I always do whenever I can is to ask every applicant to submit a short 2 to 3 minute videos to basically tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're interested in sales, and why you're the best candidate for this role in this company. So that's the second step. The third step in the recruiting process is you always want to do a mock interview. Okay, and I've talked about this extensively before, but I'll take you through a real process I'm going through right now. But those are the 3 steps that you always want to have. And you can screw up a lot of the other things like background checks and going through someone's resume. But if you have these 3 things, you'll never run out of candidates to apply at your company. And 2, you always end up finding the best of the best that end up applying anyways, unless you have a dedicated, HR person, headhunter who's going out and hunting people for you all the time. And of course, most companies I talk to don't have that luxury. So this is how you build a persistent, consistent pipeline of great candidates sales candidates for your company. So here's what it looks like for us. So again, going back to the biggest mistake is most founders don't hire people based on the actual task and the actual day-to-day operations of the role. They ask hypothetical questions on the resume. They ask about previous work experience, which is all great, but especially with the sales role, it's very hard and difficult to assess how someone would perform on the job until they do. So the best way to do that is to simulate and turn your interview process into a prospecting a session. Okay, so the exact 2 things that I'm doing in my recruiting process right now, again, for a multi-billion-dollar, $20 billion valuation public company, multinational company, is exactly the 3 that I outlined. They have a screening call, that's my top of the funnel, with the HR person. Then on a call with me is the mock call for prospecting. So this is the call where they're going to try to schedule a meeting with me as my ideal client. So let's say I work with dentist, right? So I'm a coach, or I have a program for dentist. On this interview with me, I'm going to pretend to be a dentist, and I'm going to have the candidate put on a hat of an appointment setter at my company, and they're going to try to set a meeting with me as a dentist to talk about my product, which is a coaching software, whatever the product or the offering that you have is for dentists, right? If they pass this mock interview, okay, the next step is a panel interview with my team members. Again, this is a larger company, so this can be the sales team, right? Whoever's going to be working most closely with this setter. If you're starting out, you're brand new, you don't have a sales team yet, it should be with you, the founder, and the marketing person. And or you can sub it with the marketing person and your salesperson if you have a sales rep. If you are the only sales rep for the company, you should be on this meeting, on this panel interview. If you're a little bit bigger and you have a sales team, I will connect them with the marketing and head of marketing and the salesperson, or the head of sales and the head of customer success. Guess what? Because those are the people that your sales reps, going to be working with most closely. So you want to have both eyes and different perspective on the panel interview. And what we're doing with the panel interview is the next step in the prospecting process, right? So step 1, we set a meeting with the business owner. What happens on step 2, right? Step 2 is going to be discovery. So I want to understand how this rep, like the process that this rep would go through, this person would go through to research somebody as a prospect for my company, and what are some of the discovery questions they would ask the prospect to truly understand the problems and challenges, right? So the second step is I give them a scenario where I say, hey, by the way, great job on your prospecting call. You've set a meeting with me, the business owner. Here's a little bit about me as this business. I'm a dentist. I've had this practice for 10 years. I own the building, right? I have 10 staff, whatever the number is. So I give them a scenario of an actual customer or an ideal prospect that I want in my business. I would literally spell out all of the characteristics of this firm, right? How old I am, how long I've been in business, how many members that employees that I have, what challenges that I have as a dentist and a dental office owner, business owner. What are the solutions in the market for this? And how does my product, or how does your product help the dentist with this, with the problems, right? What are some of the common objections that the dentist would have for the offer or the product? So I literally give them 3 bullet point each point in each section, right? Who I am as a dentist, 3 bullet points. Common problems I have, 3 bullet points. How my product or my services solve this for a dentist, 3 or 4 bullet points. And then all I'm asking the candidate to do is to show up to the panel interview prepared to answer some of those questions, and also prepare a list of discovery questions they would ask the panel about the dental firm to figure out what problems the dental practice has, and how this candidate would talk about the solutions that my product and services offer. So that's literally all it is. That's the job of a setter or a sales development rep, right? They have to get the meeting and they have to ask intelligent discovery questions. So I literally implement that into the recruiting process. And the key here is I'm not looking for someone who does it perfectly. If someone does it perfectly, great, they have the experience. But more likely than not, unlikely, they're still looking for an entry-level sales position, right? So you want to look for somebody who can, again, for an appointment setting or a sales development role, you're looking for 3 things. Are they coachable? Are they, do they have grit? Can they take a no? and how do they react in the face of rejection. And 3, are they smart and intelligent, right, streetwise. So by doing these 2 kind of mock interview simulation, if you will, 1, you're giving them a taste of what it's like to be an appointment setter or a sales development rep at your company. But 2, you're literally testing them on the job, right? And you're going to be able to quickly see who's quick on their feet, who can think, who can take feedback, who can incorporate feedback on the fly, and who can think critically, right? Because a lot of people can just, like, you literally have to serve them everything on a plate. They don't proactively seek out solutions and learn on their own. And that's hard to tease out on a call, right? But if you take them through the 2 simulations, if you will, I'm gonna start calling these simulations from now on. If you take them through these 2 exercises, simulations, you're gonna be quickly able to see who is intelligent in their way of thinking, and who's gonna be able to pick up things quickly. So, does it sound like a lot of work? Yes, but also I will tell you, other than ad spend in a coaching business or a consulting or a service-based business, other than that spend, labor is going to be your biggest cost center, right? And the untold lost profits and inefficiency is not in the people that you've already hired or rock stars. It's in the people that you hired, invest a bunch of money in, and either they are not good or they are so good they end up going and work for somebody else after you spent all this money and this effort into hiring them, right? So that's why you want to find the right people and implement this 2-step process, because the more you invest into this, the more they're going to be wanting to be invested in your company, right? If you're just looking for a fly-by-night, someone to take your order, maybe setting meetings through the DMs, the longevity isn't there, in my opinion. And also, you don't tend to find people with a long-term vision who actually want to develop a career out of with you. Okay, so that's the key bullet points on building a world-class hiring process.